Hi guys, my name's Connor. I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd, a Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran, and never Trump Republican, maybe a liberal Republican at this point. I don't even know how to describe myself. But anyways, Nick the Knife Fuentes has eulogized the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and he had a massive stream. According to Rumble statistics, which could be inflated, but according to Rumble statistics, he had 176,000 live viewers. This video posted yesterday, even if the stats are inflated, have 1.5 million views. Like it or not, Nick Fuentes is a conservative commentator who people will be paying attention to. As a result, we are going to take a look at what he said. We're going to pause it intermittently. I'm going to try to say what I'm going to try to criticize him in good faith, and we'll take it from there. Should be starting any moment now because I only rewinded like there we go.
Good evening, everybody. You are watching America First. My name is Nicholas J. Fuentes. I am joining you tonight under some very dark circumstances. Normally, I like to say we got a great show for you tonight, and I think it's going to be an excellent show. But of course, the news is unbelievably tragic. Tonight, as you know, you're all gathered here. We're going to talk tonight about the death of Charlie Kirk. And even saying that out loud, the words are still very surreal and disturbing. I said this last night and I meant it as I watched the chaos and the tragedy unfold yesterday afternoon. And I know everybody else feels exactly the same way. It didn't feel real. That's the characterization I keep seeing from everybody. On TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter. People have been profoundly affected by this, and we're not sure why. And hopefully we can talk a little bit about maybe why that is. But as I said yesterday.
Okay. So listen, I'm going to try to make it through a healthy chunk of the content, at least 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever. You guys know I like to yap, but this is my frustration. Is that Nick, for the past 5 or 10 years, has talked about dispossessing Jews of political power and the malignant influence of Jews and Israel in American politics. And he could genuinely believe those things, right? He's also talked about how blacks and Hispanics are, low IQ immigrants or low IQ natives who ruin our societies, and they do X, Y, Z, ABC. And I would say that it would be probably pretty easy to find a bunch of clips of Nick advocating for voluntary and involuntary segregation, resegregation, and also dispossessing Jews of power. So for me, my curiosity about watching Charlie Kirk's neck explode in a bullet was, how did you think this was going to be achieved? Did you think that you were just going to seize electoral power and you were going to use law enforcement to achieve these goals? Did you think that you were going to convince so many people of Christian imperium? Nick and I had a conversation about liberal versus Christian theocracy. And he effectively said, yeah, I want Christian imperium. I want Christian theocracy. Ideally, if I could be the Christian monarch of America or the Americas, I would be. And so how did you think that was going to happen? Because I'm telling you, if you thought that was going to happen without violence, without murder, without death, you were deluding yourself, and you were effectively a child talking about things that you had no understanding of. This is why I've been cautioning against civil war. This is why I've been cautioning against extremism and violence for a decade now. You could check, not that I want you to find my Facebook, but you could find my Facebook in 2016. Antifa started beating the shit out of random dissident right-wing people at a protest, and somebody knocked out an anti-fascist kid and he smacked his head into the pavement. This was one of the first deaths as a result of the culture war. And I said, if you guys engage in extra legal violence, this is going to get worse. And now here we are 10 years later, and it's substantively worse. But Nick Fuentes, in my opinion, has been cheering this on for a decade, and it's only after he watches a peer in his industry get his jugular shot out, that it has become real for him.
like many of you, I got the alert from a friend of mine who I believe was either at the event or had friends at the event at UVU in Utah. A friend of mine texted me and said, Charlie has been shot. I said, Charlie Kirk? They said, yes. And we watched it unfold live. We're still getting updates. We don't know exactly what transpired. And again, we'll get into some of that as well, some of the uncertainties and unanswered questions. But I am devastated and legitimately affected and struck viscerally.
Bizd says this is Light Yagami taking over L's mantle after killing him vibes. Yeah.
Such a sensational video, images, such an unspeakable, horrible tragedy. And I literally had to take a day to collect myself. Normally, this is a current events show. I'm live every night and I discuss the news of the day. And I've been there through many of the big developments over the years. Same day, January 6th, Trump assassination attempt, the elections, the pandemic. But this one was different. And I think everybody feels that way about it.
Because you didn't know what you were talking about. Okay. If I talk to Nick, or if I talk to Andrew Wilson, or if I talk to any Christian dissident Trump supporter, and bear in mind, I know that Nick has been a critic of Trump, but he's been a critic of Trump because Trump hasn't gone far enough. He's not a critic of Trump because he thinks that Trump is, going too far. The opposite. And so if you're cheering on the gutting of USAID, which was $10 billion, it was 0.16% of the budget, and then you cut taxes, which are more than $10 billion, so you're running a deficit, you're not a fiscal conservative, you're joking yourself. You are deluding yourself to thinking that's good policy. And as a result of that policy, 14 million people are projected to die over the next 5 years as a result of dengue, malaria, cholera, and other preventable disease. And 3 million of those deaths are a result of the cutting of PEPFAR, which is to prevent people from getting infected with HIV and AIDS in Africa, which is projected to have saved 25 million lives over the past 2 decades. You can have whatever, oh, well, we shouldn't be paying for it. Okay, well, off-ramp the programs to other partners who are willing to pick it up. Don't just shut off the spigot. And what conservatives have done is they've shut off the spigot, which is going to result in millions of dead. And whenever I bring this up, they're like, oh, well, it's not the same as us shooting them in the face. It's more like if I was giving money to a charity and then I stopped giving money to a charity, am I responsible for those deaths? No. But let's make it a little bit more specific. Let's say that you specifically are paying for a child's medical care, and then you pay for it for 20 years because you care about this child, you love this child, you want to take care of this child, right? And then one day you're like, you know what? I want to put a laser beam on a C-130 spooky gunship. And so as a result, I'm not going to pay for this kid's treatment anymore. Instead of going to the parents and going to the hospital and saying, hey, I'm interested in spending my money differently. Let's find you somebody else who can sponsor the care of this child. Instead, you go, hey, there's no more money for this kid. Lol, go fuck yourself. And then the kid dies 2 weeks later. Are you slightly morally responsible for that child's death? I would argue so. Are you a monstrous piece of shit? I would argue so. And it's the same thing with torturing people in Saqqat who were innocent and laughing about it, like Andre Hernandez Romero. It's the same thing about drone striking a boat with 11 people on it and having no idea who was actually on the boat and being like, lol, they were definitely narco-terrorists. This is funny. Ha 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 ha. And overthrowing the fucking government of the United States through the false elector scheme and the continued lies about January 6, 2021. But the continued lies about election fraud, where you want to subvert the entire Constitution of the United States so you can appoint a king. And you expected nobody to get mad? You expected to be able to do all these things, to kill all these people, to torture all these people, to kill these people through neglect, and no one would get mad? Nobody would take a shot with you? Nobody would engage in violence or terrorism? Are you stupid? And by the way, that's not an endorsement of the violence. Charlie Kirk should be alive. Charlie Kirk should be able to say whatever the hell he wants to say, no matter how violent or stupid his policies are. And we should fight it out within the marketplace of ideas. But did you think that you were going to be able to kill that many people without a response? Get the fuck out of here.
It felt like a nightmare. That's the only...
Because you saw it. Because you saw it with your own eyes instead of it being a social media abstraction.
way that I can accurately describe it, actually. Throughout the entire day yesterday, I just could not process it. It did not sink in. It still hasn't fully sunk in. Like I said earlier, you say those words, the death of Charlie Kirk, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the murder of Charlie Kirk. I watched his Wikipedia page go from Charlie Kirk is to Charlie Kirk was. It doesn't feel real. It feels like a nightmare that we'll never wake up from. And I say that as somebody who was not even a fan, not a friend, and actually an adversary, a foe. I can only imagine what his friends, his colleagues.
Sorry, Sabri Keller, this is exactly what I'm saying. Like I said the other day, before some of these commentators now know that they are on the menu as well, and it's gotten them shook. Yup.
And especially his wife, his young children, you can only imagine what they're going through. And so what happened yesterday is still so raw and so sensitive. The country is profoundly affected, at least some of it is. We'll talk about that too. And so tonight I'm going to try to the best of my ability, carry out my responsibility. I believe, and I think you know, that I'm somebody that many of the young people, young conservatives are looking up to.
Christ, I hate you. All right. You also support Israel, which you pay to commit genocide, and now you are moralizing about USAID? Yeah, Alex425, because you're not familiar with my content because you're not a regular chatter. You're another fucking dipshit coming in to say stupid shit within my chat. So this is going to be the content, guys. So just buckle in. If you enjoyed this content, awesome. Stick around, like the stream, share it with your friends, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. If you don't enjoy me listening to Nick, responding to Nick every 5 minutes, and then also responding to dumbass fucking chatters, this isn't the content for you. This is the content, okay? And you're moralizing about USAID. Yeah, because I don't think the state of Israel should be evaporated. But as I've articulated on my stream multiple times, Israel should take it upon itself to not ethnically cleanse Gaza. They should be currently securing 10% of Gaza and rebuilding it with water infrastructure, electric infrastructure, housing infrastructure, schools, roads, commercial districts, all the stuff that provides for a thriving society. And then they should turn it back over to the Gazans. And then they should do another 10% and another 10% and another 10% until Gaza is rebuilt. And they should also allow humanitarian aid in. If you think that politics is a binary between evaporate the state of Israel or evaporate the state of Israel or Israel can do no wrong, you're a fucking idiot. You're a rube. You should not be engaged in politics. You should not be talking about policy or diplomacy or the military or how it's deployed. The world is infinitely more complex than that, and you are a rube. You are a lemming. You are AdSense. You are a super chat. You're not a critically thinking human being or a moral agent. You are a lemming.
I have a lot of credibility with the far right, the radical right. And throughout his career, Charlie Kirk always characterized me as a troll. I don't say that with any malice at this point in time, but that's what he said. And many in Turning Point USA said that I and my followers are nihilistic. We only want destruction. And I think that I have an obligation to the country. I think I have an obligation to God. I think I have an obligation to all of you.
Good.
I think I have responsibility to prove that that is not true. It's not about me, but now that it is the morning after, the day has dawned where Charlie Kirk is now dead at the hands of some unknown attacker.
Here, shot. You're on the chopping block already. I already cut off whatever 4690's head. You're on the chopping block too. Connor looks at the genocide in Gaza and says, problem, question mark? It's just politics, guys. Problem, question mark? Yeah, whenever I ever fucking said that. How did me just now articulating my position on Gaza should be rebuilt by the Israelis and Palestinians should be moved back in, civilian Palestinians who are not a part of Hamas should be moved back into there. That way they don't get accused or participate in ethnic cleansing. How is that problem, question mark? Tell me here, Shot, because I swear to God, the next comment I get from you where you're like, Connor endorses genocide. Connor endorses Charlie Kirk getting shot in the neck. You're too stupid to be in my chat.
It is our responsibility, mine and all of ours, to step up.
Yeah. Alex425 says you're for cutting off aid for Israel following that logic, right? Because you have never advocated for that to my knowledge. Yeah. So what I would say is that you can't cut off all aid to Israel because you don't want them to take their technology and take their commercial shit, take their microchips, take their high-tech industry and just sell it to China without impunity because we fully cut off Israel. But I'm 100% for diplomatic leverage against Israel. I've said as much. You just don't watch my content.
And to get serious, to the extent that politics was fun or we took it lightly, I think we now realize it just got very real.
Patsimo says, did Connor just go on a diatribe about how violent right-wing policies killed millions of people? Yeah, you did. Yes, you are projected to kill 14 million people through stupid, inane, counterproductive, R-slurred policies over the next 5 years. You are projected to kill 14 million people. You have killed thousands or tens of thousands of people in Ukraine through incompetence already. Yeah, you've killed people. You're involved in politics. Politics is how, it's who and how people wield power. That is politics. If you are allergic to that, you should not be looking at politics. You should be looking at sports. You should be looking at wakeboarding magazines. You should be reading Maxim and staring at like celebrities' boobs. You should not be involved in politics if you do not understand that politics is who and how power is wielded, and these decisions kill people.
It's been real. People talk about a civil war. They say a war is coming. Some say we're already in one.
Okay. Yeah. Alex425, you're gone. No one said evaporate Israel, idiot. False dichotomy, calling me a rube. Fine God. Go fuck yourself. You are dumb. And yes, plenty of people had said that the end state of anti-Israeli protest is the destruction of the state of Israel. So go fuck yourself. You don't know what you're talking about. You're too dumb for politics. You're too dumb for my chat. Bye. Squad Wiper says, not to be a troll, but Gaza isn't a country. If it is sovereign, then Israel shouldn't be allowed to control it at any part of their land. I don't know if the USA should support either. Okay, that's not a troll. That's your earnestly held belief. I don't ban people for expressing their earnestly held beliefs.
We have an obligation now. The leaders, the spokesmen, the men, the young men, the elderly men, we have an obligation to lead. And
true.
I want to start, before we get into any of it, by saying this, just as a general note. I've been around now for 7 or 8 years. That's not a very long time, but it's long enough. I've lived through a lot of these events, Charlottesville, January 6th, the Groyper War, many things. And I know that in my career, I've made a lot of mistakes. I've done things I regret, said things I regret. I've made a lot of the same mistakes twice. And I've been lucky because
Alex says, please just shut the fuck up and let Nick cook. You're not 1% the order Nick is. Okay, bye. Go watch the original, dumbass.
I've lived and I have this platform and I'm able to speak to all of you in spite of that. And I think maybe one of the reasons why is because I have been afforded the opportunity to learn a lot. Having been in the center of dissident right-wing politics, far-right politics, in the center of this cultural moment, whatever you want to call that. As an archetypal, disaffected young white man, angry young...
Fatsimo says, who's more violent, Kirk or his assassin? His assassin. Obviously, because Charlie Kirk never put his hands on anybody and never killed anybody to my knowledge. But Fatsimo, that you're not going to like this analogy, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. Who is more violent, Hitler or Goebbels? Right? Hitler was the person who commanded the armed forces of Germany. Hitler was the person who instantiated the last solution as the necessary prerequisite in order to rid Europe of Jewry. Okay? Hitler is the person who killed hundreds of thousands, millions, maybe tens of millions of people. Okay? So Hitler is clearly more violent than Goebbels. But did Goebbels assist in his violence? Was he a propagandist for Hitler? Did he help create the culture that allowed Hitler to run Nazi Germany? And so when you say, in my opinion, stupidly, when you say who's more violent, the assassin or Charlie Kirk, what you're saying is, well, Charlie Kirk deserves no criticism because all he did was words. Well, Goebbels used words. So does Goebbels deserve no criticism? Obviously not the case. Words have power. Words have meaning. Take responsibility for the utterances you make in the world that have meaning, that shape the world and shape people's perceptions of the world. I'm happy to see that Nick is realizing this. I am dumbfounded by the fact that it took watching one of his peer professionals getting his jugular evaporated in order to realize this lesson.
Young white man, Trump supporter, however you want to characterize that. I have been in the thick of it for a very long time. And seeing many crises and tragedies and things that we cannot explain, things that are difficult to cope with. I will say first, as I said, as a general note, before we move on, it cannot be overstated how important it is in a time like this to put our intentions in alignment with the will of God.
I'll take it.
Everybody's very emotional. Everybody is whipped up, and rightfully so, justifiably so. People are furious. I don't know that the left fully understands that. I don't know that normies fully understand that. People are absolutely beside themselves. I've never seen the right wing more angry, more furious, and this has been building. Here we are today, the day after Charlie Kirk has been killed, but we're starting here in the middle of the story. It's been going on for over a decade, and these things compound over time and they accumulate.
I agree. Painter points time. Painter points time. Let's compare our sins. Why not? We need to. Okay. Sins of the left wing, sins of the right wing. Let's compare our sins. And by the way, right-wingers, dissident right-wingers, you are free to type in my chat what you think the sins of the left wing are, and I will add them to my list if I think they are descriptively accurate. Sins of the right wing. There, but for the grace of God, go I. Okay? None of us are free from sin. None of us. All right? So let's do sins of the left wing. I was around in the 2010s. Put gays, blacks, progressives, and annoying, over-the-top messaging into video games and movies, trying to promote a degenerate, sex-positive, trans-positive, sometimes drug-positive, cynical, destructive, postmodern worldview. I would say that's one of the left sins in the 2010s. I would say that one of the left sins is taking over academia and popular culture to the point that they have alienated half of the population who feel like they are always presented as the enemy. I would say using liberal and progressive values to govern social media to the point that in the late 2010s, it felt like you could not be a Christian literalist, social conservative, pro-Trump person without being censored. Censoring COVID and election topics in the name of the greater good. Leaving the border wide open, causing a migration crisis that has resulted in murders and rapes. Prioritizing the economy and the profits of corporations over the well-being of your working and middle class. I would say that neoliberals are particularly guilty of this. Middle class, shrugging off crimes committed by ethno-religious minorities and sexual minorities while freaking out about every crime committed by a white straight man. These are some of the sins that I think the left wing is guilty of. And by the way, I will add more. If I need to open up a new page, then I'll open up a new page. But this is what I think the right wing is guilty of. Electing an incompetent pedophile to the highest office of our republic, lying about an election in order to install that incompetent pedophile as a new king, failing to recognize how serious that is, and then mismanaging COVID, resulting in economic devastation and 1.1 million dead, blaming all economic issues on the left, even though Trump caused a lot of it, or Trump presided over a lot of it. In the second term, banning people for their religion from travel, disrupting and destroying families. Then let's move into the second Trump term, because truth is Trump 1.0 wasn't anywhere near as bad as Trump 2.0, except for, trying to overthrow, because I don't think that's fully clear, overthrow the Republic of the United States. For that, you can clearly and truly, anybody who's a Trump supporter can clearly and truly go fuck themselves for that one, okay? Then I would say in the second Trump term, delegating economic powers to the president that are disrupting our economy and destroying I would say hundreds of thousands of jobs and businesses. Mass deporting people, including innocent people, to a Central American gulag to be tortured and sodomized, and laughing about it. Drone striking 11 people 1,000 miles south of our border without due process or evidence and laughing about it, killing 14 million people to save 0.16% of the budget. You then cut taxes on, making the budget worse. And then I would say backstabbing Ukraine, resulting in thousands or tens of thousands of deaths. Now, I'm going to admit, okay? I'm going to admit that I hate the fucking left wing, okay? For a lot of reasons. I hate the left wing doing all of this shit. This shit is worse. Okay? I hate to say it. I've lost people in chat by, instead of just aping Nick's content, I'm actually talking about what's going on. But I don't give a fuck about those people. Because if you're not willing to sit here and understand that Nick is not your God king, he's not your demographic prince, and you're not willing to listen to why we're in the fucking mess that we're in from somebody who probably pretty astutely understands it, then fuck you. Okay? This is why Charlie Kirk is dead. It's because people saw this and they were so upset by it. They saw 14 million and a few 100,000 people die. And they said, wow, the right wing's fucking monstrous. They're a bunch of pieces of shit. They support a bunch of evil shit. And of course the left wing does evil shit. Of course they do. The assassination of Charlie Kirk is fucking evil. Of course it is. However, you minimizing and ignoring all of this is why the left wing doesn't give a shit. Okay? Tyler Robinson reportedly was a part of various anti-fascist Discord servers, according to CBS News. I'm just telling you, on Polymarket, you could have won $10,000 if you took my bet. Eli Gray says there were Arabs, Muslims, Jews, and lots of people living in the area, and other countries in the Middle East still had Jewish populations until Israel became a state. Blame the UK and US and Oz too. Sure, why not? All right. Anyways, back to Nick.
And I, like everybody else, recognize that this could potentially be a watershed moment. This is a ripple effect. We may look back in time and see a chain reaction, an inexorable chain reaction that leads to nothing other than destruction, devastation, bloodshed, misery.
Patsimo, you might be too stupid to understand what I'm saying, but I forgive you.
I don't think it's crazy to say millions of dead bodies. And we must have the prudence. We must have the confidence in our convictions, in our faith in God. This is the test. It's easy to believe in prayer when things are easy. It's easy to believe in God, mercy, forgiveness.
Sure, right there. There you go. BLM riots and Steve Scalise shooting. Absolutely. Let me add it.
Temperance when things are easy. It's when things are hard, when they're confusing, when we feel justifiably angry, wrathful, prideful. That's the test. That's when it counts. And that is when mature people, and I recognize the folly in me saying that. I don't consider myself an extremely mature person. I think I'm a frivolous person in many ways. But it's an obligation for all of us to grow up now and recognize the gravity of the situation we're in, the peril that we're all in. And we have to ask ourselves, what are our intentions? We have to set them intentionally. We have to set them in alignment with God, with the gospel. We have to think not just about the present moment and what we're feeling, but about the long term, the good of our country, the good of our fellow countrymen, both the people we agree with and disagree with, our children, our progeny. And we have to think about that moment before God. We have to think about our moment before God in judgment. And we're asked about that golden rule. We don't save ourselves. We approach God with humility. We approach the judgment as weak, as mortal, fallen, before we take up arms, before we relish in our anger and sit with it, sit with our rage and resentment and fuel it and get into these loops, feedback loops, I think it is so important. And this is why I said last night I wasn't going to do a show, and I really meant it. And I think everybody needed one night at least to sleep on this, to pray, and to pray not just for the repose of Charlie Kirk's soul and for his wife and for his 2 young children and for the people affected in his organization and for the people that were closest to him, but also to pray for the wisdom, the strength, the prudence, the humility, the fortitude to approach this in the right way. Because how we respond to this tragedy, like all of these events, like all of the persecution, all of the suffering, the anguish, it will define us. It will define our country. It is life or death here. And what I am urging at the very outset of this, at the minimum, is caution. Let us not be hasty. If you're thinking of picking up arms, put them down.
I am going to applaud Nick for this. I blame Nick for setting the temperature and the tempo of this current political moment. I blame him for being hyperbolic, for talking about dispossessing Jews of power, for talking about these things in such a heated manner where I think that it was incredibly possible. Let me just ask somebody something. Back to one. But while I think Nick is partially responsible for setting the temperature of our current political moment, I do applaud him instead of using this as a moment to further tensions, to ratchet up, to say, yep, now's the time to get guns. Now's the time to get ready for civil war. Now's the time for race war. Now's the time for religious war. Now's the time for this, that, the other. He could perfectly do that, and his audience is 100% primed for that action. The fact, now you can argue it's a sense of self-preservation because he knows he's on the chopping block. If somebody killed Charlie, they sure as hell want to kill Nick, right? So you can say that this is selfishly motivated. It's still the right thing to do. So I applaud Nick for doing the right thing.
And if you can't be convinced altogether, put them down today. Put them down tomorrow. Let us be cautious. Let us be prudent. Let's think. Let's get right. Let's get right with God before we act hastily. And the reason I say that I have come to this reaction over many years, seeing many crises, is because not only is there a spiritual dimension to all of this, and the devil uses our emotions against us, uses our best intentions, our best inclinations against us to doubt our faith in God, that God is both just and merciful, our faith in God, that he will deliver the vengeance that we are told is not in our hands. Trust in his plan and not create our own. It's not just for the spiritual reasons, but also for the political reasons. Ask yourself, we all recognize this is a watershed moment. We're never going back from this. This is the shot heard around the world, literally. One shot, one kill, an international incident, and a outpouring of both love and affection in the vigils that you see for Charlie Kirk across the country.
Sorry.
Anger and resentment.
That's funny. Sorry.
Shot, one kill, an international incident.
One shot, one kill, an international incident, the shot heard around the world. Now, I'm not saying that this is what Nick's saying. If Nick would respond to my DMs, we would just talk about it. But one shot, one kill is a military saying where marksmen, snipers, designated marksmen are encouraged to be so proficient with their weapons and their accuracy that they are capable of doing one shot, one kill. So I feel like that's an allusion to the competency of the shooter, implying military training. And then I feel like an international incident, if you wanted to say it's international because American politics affect international affairs, then sure. But for me, knowing Nick Fuentes, the implication is that this is intel. This is a Mossad operation. This is a Jewish operation. This is a false flag operation in order to further destroy the morality of the United States of America. That's what I would infer. I would be happy to talk to Nick at any time about his genuinely held beliefs.
And a outpouring of both love and affection in the vigils that you see for Charlie Kirk across the country, but also in anger and resentment, hatred, people ridiculing his death, all of these different things. It's important also to understand that politically, it is in crises like these when we become instrumentalized by forces outside of our control. When we take our eye off the ball, and I don't want to be too explicit at this moment now, but when we take our eye off the ball because of something so sensational, because of something so emotionally charged, that's why they do these things. That's why supernatural as well as societal forces do these things or capitalize them and take advantage of them. And people, guided perhaps by good intentions or righteous indignation, become unwitting instruments of forces beyond their control, beyond their understanding. They become pawns in a larger game. And so, in order for us not to be agents of evil, a supernatural evil, a worldly evil, in order for us not to be instrumentalized by sophisticated and powerful forces that would use this tragedy to manipulate society for its own ends, in order to save our souls from the kind of wrath, anger, vengefulness that will surely land us a seat in hell, I would first say, before I say anything else, especially to the young people, the adolescents, that I understand how you feel.
I think he's implying that this is an international Mossad level Jewish intel operation. Maybe I'm brain broken by being on the internet for too long, but I feel like that's the implication. I'm not going to directly accuse him of it. It feels vague enough that I would want him to clarify. And I feel like the instinct, right? The instinct here is saying, like, when you get angry, you get stupid. And when you get stupid, you make mistakes. And when your political enemies are trying to make you angry and stupid, then you might be an unwitting pawn in somebody else's game. This is all perfectly sober, insane advice. However, if I was able to, I would be asking Nick Fuentes, what do you put the probability of this being a Israeli-led Mossad operation where they recruited this young man in order to kill Charlie Kirk, or it's a false flag, or he's a patsy, or, you know, I would want to ask those specific questions.
Lay down your arms. Those that live by the sword will perish by the sword. Remember what Christ said. This is our cup to drink from, all of us. Death, suffering, martyrdom in some cases.
Yep.
It's all part of it. It's all part of life. And not to be fatalistic and not to minimize it, but as a Christian, we can't always talk about the prosperity gospel. We can't always talk about making money or prosperity and the kumbaya. We also have to talk about the other side of things, which is that
Hearshot says, I don't know whether or not Trump's a pedophile. Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, birthday letter. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and pull up the Jeffrey Epstein check. Excuse me. Okay, this check in the birthday book had a tag under it that from Jeffrey Epstein to Donald Trump for $22,500 that said, for a depreciated woman who knew how to service people or something. It might have been actually in reference to Virginia Giuffre. So the text says, Jeffrey Epstein's early talents with, God, why didn't they write that down? Or why didn't they zoom it in? Can I zoom this in? This is so annoying. Jeffrey something early talents, listen to a woman, sells fully depreciated woman to Donald Trump for $22,500. Something. Anyways, the implication is that Jeffrey Epstein has purchased a woman from Donald Trump, and he was known to sexually recruit teenagers out of Mar-a-Lago. He recruited Virginia Giuffre out of Mar-a-Lago. So in my opinion, Jeffrey Epstein, as a joke, was at some charity event and paid Donald Trump $23,000 for a fully depreciated teenage girl that he had already ran through. Which is a disgusting way to describe it, but guess what? If it's disgusting and it's true, then it's true. What is it? Jeffrey Epstein drawing of girl's birthday book. This was his 2003 birthday book. Here is a picture. I don't know who drew this, but this is What a Great Country. Jeffrey Epstein with his Lolita Express and his private island giving balloons to young girls. I would say that they're between the age of 6 to 10. And then here's these girls as young women giving him massages in thongs where they can see, they have a tattoo on her ass and you can see her ass and buttocks. So Jeffrey Epstein grooming children to be his sex slaves was known in the 80s, 90s, and thousands. This is all evidence turned over from the Jeffrey Epstein estate. So you would have to tell me how and why Jeffrey Epstein faked his own evidence to fuck over Donald Trump. You're going to have to explain that to me, okay? And I don't think you're going to have a convincing explanation. This signature has already been corroborated. People say, oh, it's not his signature. It's not his signature. No, he has signatures that look identical to this. And this letter to Jeffrey Epstein says, there must be more to life than having everything. Donald says, yes, there is, but I won't tell you what it is. Jeffrey says, nor will I, since I also know what it is. Donald Trump, says, we have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Yes, we do, come to think of it. Donald Trump, enigmas never age. Have you noticed that? Jeffrey says, as a matter of fact, it was clear to me the last time I saw you. Donald Trump, a pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret. And right here, we have the hourglass shape of a woman, which is good. You know, like I'm happy that it's a woman who actually has some hips. But look at these breasts. These are tiny breasts. Donald Trump knew that Jeffrey Epstein was an ephebophile who groomed teenage prostitutes aged 14 to 17 in order to participate in his modeling agency, in which he ran orgies at his New York penthouse. And it's been alleged by some of the underage prostitutes that Jeffrey Epstein groomed into sex trafficking that they had sex with Donald Trump, that they gave handjobs to Donald Trump, that they gave blowjobs to Donald Trump. So please tell me, Hearshot, why the fuck should I not think the sitting president of the United States in the 80s, 90s, and thousands had sex with sex trafficked teenagers recruited by his good friend and known ephebophile and pedophile Jeffrey Epstein? Please tell me that I should ignore the evidence in front of my eyes. Why should I ignore the evidence in front of my eyes? I do not think you will not have a good answer.
We have a Lord and Savior that was crucified on the cross by our sins, by our own iniquities, all of us. And not just the killers and the scoundrels, and not just the obviously evil people, but also sometimes ourselves. Assuredly, everybody, you and I, everybody. So we have to take those things into consideration. We have to be humble about these things. And so that's just a word of caution. That's me trying to do my best to be responsible here before we get into the larger subject. So we'll talk about it now. As you know, Charlie Kirk was assassinated yesterday afternoon doing one of his Change My Mind events, his college tour. It was one of the first stops on his new college tour in Utah. Started out like any other day. And I'm sure for him, it was just another day. He's done this hundreds of times. He got dressed. He went to the event, talked it up with politicians and friends of his, said this is going to be a great event, filmed TikToks. And all of a sudden, a shot rang out. He died, I assume, instantly, although some of the details are uncertain. People fled. He's now gone. And the first thing I want to say about it after the word of caution is this. Of course, as I said, I was not a friend of Charlie Kirk's at all. I didn't like him. He didn't like me. We had a lot of differences, ideologically, politically, and we fought viciously. He did a lot to stifle my career and suppressed me in many ways. And I antagonized him a lot and mocked him and ridiculed him and attacked his credibility. He was my opponent. But I would never wish death upon him or anything like that. And Charlie Kirk never had a kind word to say about me in his life. Now that he has died, I'll say some kind words about him. Although I didn't agree with him, I considered him a part of the political establishment. In many ways, I considered him part of the problem. In spite of that, it is undeniable that he was a towering figure in American conservatism. It's undeniable. He was ambitious. He was a hard worker. He did things I cannot do. A lot of people said after his passing, I saw some people make oblique references to it. They said, well, if Charlie Kirk was assassinated, now the far right will step up. I don't know that there's anyone that could fill his shoes. I don't know that there's anyone that can do what he did. He died at 31 years old. And
if I'm being a cynical asshole, he's basically signaling that he doesn't want to step into the gap. Now, he could be right that Charlie Kirk was uniquely poised to be the logistical master of TPUSA and turn a fledgling organization a decade ago into a college campus chapter-based political organization with hundreds of thousands of members and hundreds of thousands of volunteers that actually have some degree of electoral impact. Nick could be absolutely correct that he's not capable of doing that same thing. But if I'm being cynical and I'm being critical, I would say Nick is saying, I don't want to step into that gap, because I almost guarantee you, if Charlie got shot and Nick tried to do what Charlie did, Nick would 100% get shot.
Left a legacy that many people could not achieve in many lifetimes. He hosted a show 3 hours a day. He went and faced down his enemies in debate. He would take on almost any challengers. I say almost because he wouldn't debate me, of course, but nevertheless, would debate anybody, anywhere, stare them down, and people don't know how difficult that is. He would sit there for hours on any subject, and then he would return home from the command center and direct the largest youth organization, the most ambitious project in conservative politics maybe ever, and he did it all before the age of 31. An absolutely brilliant, sharp, fierce warrior. Sure. For his values and his beliefs. And as I said, I disagreed with them strongly. I'll make no bones about that, and that hasn't changed. But you have to admire that this was a fighter, this was a worker, this was a champion, and above all else, maybe this is what I respected about him the most. We had our disagreements. Where we did agree is that he would go to these college campuses and proclaim the name of Jesus Christ. And ultimately, that is why he was killed. Everyone will be persecuted for the sake of Jesus Christ. Anyone, everyone. fighting and winning that spiritual battle for Christ and for his kingdom will be persecuted for his sake. And I don't believe Charlie Kirk was any different. We disagreed on much, but we agreed about abortion. We agreed about feminism. We agreed about many of the other moral, social ills of the country. And when you look at his most vicious detractors, the people celebrating his death now, possibly, probably, the gunmen that killed him, they hated him because of his defense of Christian morality. He wasn't killed necessarily, perhaps, by a socialist.
Although I think at this point we think he was.
Or by someone who disagreed about his position on fiscal policy. And this is something I think we all need to take into account, something we need to be aware of and notice. The most vicious, hateful opponents of the conservative movement of all stripes, they are the ones championing transgenderism.
All right, real quick, shill time. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. Like I said, you guys have been incredibly generous so far this week. So if you already gave a super chat and you don't have anything else to give, don't worry about it. I'm just trying to milk my lurkers, my lurkers who haven't donated on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, and they have the capacity to do so. You guys were incredibly generous this week. So if you've already given money, you're already tapped out. Do not worry about it, okay? But I do want to thank Justin, Sam, and Ensort for super chatting so far this stream. Thank you for your donations.
Which goes by another name, mutilation of the body, a disordering of the soul. It's the proponents of abortion, which is some form of child sacrifice, at the minimum, infanticide. These are the most vicious, violent, hateful detractors of even a moderate conservative like Charlie Kirk, because he stood up for those biblical values. I'll say it better, Christian values, Christian morality for Christ.
Beef Supreme says transgenocide is a complete and total lie. Yeah, that's why I put it in sins of the left. Jonah Zilla was bringing up the transgenocide as an example of the left wing being fucking crazy. But immediately after, I don't know if you saw it, I don't know if I mentioned it, I put trans people being, disbarred from society through legislation. We can argue about the efficacy of some of the legislation. We can talk about bathrooms. We can talk about sports. We can talk about combat sports. We can talk about all that kind of shit. But I'm not really here for that. I'm here to listen to Nick's points and also write down the sins of the left and right as we perceive them.
Himself for the truth incarnate. And for that, I consider him a true martyr. And I hope his reward is in heaven. I'll also say he was clearly a loving father, a loving husband. He was beloved by millions of people. That is obvious. And although I do not count myself among his fans, it was clear that millions upon millions of decent, earnest, good people, Christians, patriots, they did love him. And he belongs to them. And out of respect for them, I say that Charlie Kirk was a good man. God bless him. And despite our differences, our past debates, I consider that over. And I pray for the repose of his soul, for his family, for him. That's Charlie Kirk. Now, aside from that, it's important to say that it's obviously a horrific thing. And I think that what is so striking about it is because it became so real in that moment. It was such a graphic video. This is somebody that we felt like we all knew. I never met him. I never shook his hand. I never spoke with him. I saw him and I've been at arm's length with him before, but I never knew him.
This pisses me off, unironically. And Justin, I understand you're a Nick Fuentes fan. If Nick Fuentes for the past decade has talked about dispossessing Jews from power in American society, and if he's talked about resegregating blacks and Hispanics away from white enclaves, that's not going to be achieved through peaceful means. There will be people who are beaten, shot, killed, stabbed, murdered in either the political struggle in order to achieve those ends or as a result of these policies. So him not realizing that what he was talking about was deadly serious until he saw Charlie Kirk's jugular get fucking evaporated by a hunting cartridge. To me, that's like complete and total immaturity. Just absolute immaturity.
But to us, he was imminent. He was ubiquitous. He was all over TikTok making content. He was synonymous with campus conservatism. And like many personalities, politicians, the kind of medium that he used, social media, live streaming, we all developed a parasocial relationship with him. And whether we loved him or we hated him, he was known to us. And other people that we know die, but they die in hospitals or they die when we're not looking. He was publicly executed, suddenly, unexpectedly.
So hold on. You guys are missing the point, okay? I don't think that it was an Israeli op, okay? I don't think that it was an Israeli op. But Cosner Chase says, Charlie was a fan of the so-called genocide. I don't know why Israel would kill Charlie when he's a few people who supports Israel now. Justin says it doesn't make sense to believe that Connor Charlie supported Israel. What is happening to Charlie Kirk right now? I'm serious. I want you to think about this real quick. You guys have a phenomenal taste in content because you are Counterpoints viewers, okay? Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage in chats, super chats, memberships if you got them, okay? You guys are already above average intelligence because you're consuming this content. What has happened to Charlie Kirk since he's been murdered, okay? I don't believe that he was killed by Mossad, but Charlie Kirk has been turned into a martyr. He is a warrior of free speech. All of his hyperbolic rhetoric has been minimized and sanitized so as not to defame his rhetoric. And if anything, Bibi Netanyahu has tweeted about him 2 or 3 times. He is a martyr in the pro-Israeli cause. So y'all thinking like, oh, why would Israel kill Charlie Kirk? He's an advocate on their behalf. If you were conspiracy brained, it would be because Charlie Kirk might be more powerful as a martyr and a symbol than he is as an alive activist and pundit. Okay? So I'm not saying that's the case. I do think that if the shooter was confirmed to be in anti-fascist discords, if on the side of the bullet was written an Italian anti-fascist slogan, if his dad is a uber conservative, but this kid was a part of Democratic Socialist Party's Discord groups, social media groups, et cetera, so he was likely rebelling against his dad, then I think that dollars to donuts, 99 to 1, this is a leftist. This is a democratic socialist. This is somebody who thought that he was shooting a fascist. Okay? So I think that's what happened. Is a lone socialist shot Charlie Kirk in the neck. Okay? However, I'm just saying, don't lose your minds. Think more complexly, please.
Expectedly in front of millions of people on camera. And we saw in graphic detail his life end that way. I think that's why this is having such a profound effect on people. And the reason that it has shaken everybody to their core, and in some ways, unconscionably has become divisive.
Lethal Lance says, you plan on reacting to the clip of Destiny explaining game theory and prisoner's dilemma in regards to left-right politics? If it's in the XQC debate, I'll react to it on Monday. If it's not in the XQC debate, then send me the clip.
Somehow is because there are a lot of decent people still left in this country. And maybe they're right wing and maybe they're left wing and maybe they voted for Trump and maybe they didn't. But in that moment, when they saw this young man, this young father, this young husband, a good man, a congenial, by every metric, a positive, cheerful person, a generative person, someone who loved America, fought for what he believed in, a disciplined person, did not indulge in vices, a family man, to see someone like this gunned down in cold blood in such a cowardly act from such a distance like that. In that moment, what was confusing before about our country, what was divisive before, where there was moral confusion or obfuscation, there was clarity. And I don't care who you voted for. I don't care what your politics are. people, white and black, men and women, feminists, conservatives.
Matthew Tatter says, Connor, look at chat. They have the shooter. We already knew that, bro. We already knew that. We were taking bets earlier in the stream whether or not they were a Groyper right-wing dissident accelerationist or a left-winger. And so, good cope. Good cope here, shot. Good cope right there. That's funny. All right, hold on. Let me finish my statement before I address here, shot. So, God, that really pissed me off. You know how to piss me off here, shot. It's a fucking talent. It's a fucking talent. Yeah, we knew the shooter, and I said that 9-1. It was a fucking leftist, but I was holding out a 1 out of 10 chance or a 1 out of 100 chance that it would be a dissident right-wing accelerationist doing a fucking gay op, right? Hearshot says maybe he's an ephebophile like his friend. Okay, Hearshot, I'm going to go ahead and test you. The right wing for the past decade has been screaming endlessly that pedophiles get the wood chipper. And it doesn't seem to matter if it's like a teenager who becomes trans or a gay teenager like Milo Yiannopoulos. Milo Yiannopoulos said that he was recruited as a homosexual man when he was 15 years old and that he himself predated on his local priest in order to fillet his local priest. So, and people called him a pedophile because he made excuses for that behavior. So you're saying maybe he's an ephebophile like Steven. So what Steven's accused of is that there was a 15-year-old who sent him bikini pictures and direct messages. And he said, wow, this girl looks older and is attractive. One of these days I'm going to get in trouble. But he blocked that girl and didn't engage with that girl. And then he's accused of engaging with a sex worker who he believed to be 18 going on 19, but was actually 17 going on 18. Compare this to Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein, who was known to sex traffic 14 to 17-year-old girls via a modeling agency. And then Donald Trump, who was his best friend until he got into legal trouble and was swapping sweet little notes. So you have Donald Trump, the current president of the United States, who in the 80s, 90s, and thousands thought it was appropriate to recruit teenage girls from flyover states into sex work, into having orgies in New York. The fact that you think, like, you can say that they're comparison in category and that they are both sex with young women, but the fact that you can compare them in severity, I think is absolute cope. And it's disgusting and fucking repulsive. It's repulsive to me that when I bring up that the current leader of the Republican Party is credibly accused of being a fucking pedophile or a ephebophile sex trafficker, your reaction to that is, oh yeah, but isn't somebody else bad too? That's repulsive to me. And I think you should think on it.
People that are straight, people that are gay. I saw across Instagram, TikTok, a good deal of people, I hope the majority in this country, were shaken to their core because they saw true evil.
Oh, he said, kidding, that was an edgy joke. Well, I didn't read that. You should have put a /S in the first one.
When the assassin's bullet cracked and the shot rang out and people saw this young, good man die for no good reason, someone knowable to us, every decent person.
Sapien Green says Bill Clinton must be pissed, but no one seems that he was lynched for his sexual misdeeds, but nobody's mad at Trump for his overflowing number of sexual misdeeds. You understand, fucking Bill Clinton's been to Lolita Island like a dozen times, right? And that staff who worked at Lolita Island said that he was in the company of young women, and they saw him in the company of young women dozens of times. You understand that, right? You understand Bill Clinton is an ephebophile who engaged with like teenage sex workers as much, if not the same as Donald Trump, which is probably why the Democrats have not released the fucking Epstein files when they had the power to do so. Sorry, but like, I don't fall for the Bill Clinton lionization either.
That still has a conscience and I choose to use that word, everyone with a conscience was able to say clearly, that is evil, that is wrong. It is wrong to violate the sanctity of life in that way. Our lives are not our own. We belong to each other. We belong to God. We did not create ourselves. We belong to our Creator. To see another human being, I don't care what they've said in the past. I don't care what their opinions are. To see someone summarily executed in such a brutal way like that, there was a moment of clarity where people saw, and this is an all too familiar sight, people saw evil, and it shocked them to their core. People saw true evil, weakness, cowardice, violence, hatred, taking away someone who loved and was loved for no reason, unjustly. And people reacted with sorrow, outrage, anger, made people sick. It shook people up because we were born with a moral law written on our hearts. It's not just written in the Gospels. It's not just written in the lives of the saints. It's also written on our hearts. We know right from wrong. We know it when we see it. We feel it. We feel it on a deeper level. And
No, guys, Hans Mayer says the father turned him into his priest. That did not sound like a left-wing extremist. Yeah, the dad is a conservative, but the kid is allegedly a leftist. And we all know that, okay? We all know that when dad is a minister and dad is a cop and dad is a giga conservative and dad's an asshole and dad doesn't pay attention to his kid, that the kid often does the opposite of what the dad does in order to piss the dad off, especially as a teenager. So if this guy is 19, early 20s, something like that, I see it as perfectly possible that he hated his dad, got into leftist discords, got into anti-fascist whatever things, became radicalized through the discords, and then killed Charlie Kirk and thought he was doing the right thing because he was a fascist. And then he felt guilty because he understood how extreme what he did actually was. He self-snitched to his dad, and then he got caught, right?
makes us physiologically sick to see it. I think that's why it had such a profound impact.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason that it has people so shaken up, another reason, as I said before, is because this is the middle of a very long story. As we all know, this did not come out of nowhere. There were many events that precipitated this. We can talk about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump last year when he was shot in the ear, and his display of strength, of courage, in the face of a cowardly attack, inspired millions of people, billions of people around the world. They saw that little twerp, that coward that climbed up on the roof and took a shot. And they saw Trump in that moment, who had nothing on his mind other than that he needed to reassure his people, show them he was not defeated or deterred. He rose up and raised his fist, rallied the people to the side of strength, of goodness, of righteousness.
The pedophile, right? The pedophile who's currently killing tens of millions of people through incompetence. Yep. Yeah, he did that. Melody for $5 says, what's your take on the tit for tat forgiveness Dems should adopt it, as Republicans having no real pushback has caused them to turn into this? I have no idea, bro. I can only control me. I know what's right for me. If I was engaged in tit for tat and Charlie Kirk had just been assassinated, then the next logical step is a left-wing alt media figure gets assassinated. That's the tit for tat, because you've boiled down politics into a binary, and any sin committed by any actor on the opposite side justifies equal and opposite response until the other side learns its lessons. That's exactly how civil wars are fomented. So for me, I think plurality of tactics. I can be the person calling for mercy, forgiveness, atonement. I can be calling for all those things because that's within my moral subset, and Stephen can be calling for tit for tat. But I think right now, Stephen could be murdered within his own tit for tat worldview. If we are in binary politics and an alternative media creator with some clout and influence was just assassinated, according to Stephen's worldview, it is maybe not justified or moral or legal, but it's understandable if Stephen gets shot right now. And I don't think Stephen wants to get shot. So, and Stephen being murdered in order to make up for Charlie Kirk getting murdered doesn't make the situation better in any way, shape, or form. It would make the situation substantively worse. So, yeah, I don't like that tit for tat shit. You decided on your own. It's not for me. I'll tell you that.
He survived by the grace of God. We saw it when Luigi Mangione gunned down the healthcare CEO months later. And like the attack on Charlie Kirk yesterday, the attack by Luigi Mangione was another chain reaction. In that moment, we saw a young man kill a father, a husband, another innocent. Once again, people say he worked for some company, he worked for an evil industry. Shot in cold blood, no trial, no charge. His life was not Luigi Mangione's to take. And for some reason, this divided the country. There were millions of people that said he was a hero, treated him like a sex icon, a champion. They made T-shirts. They celebrated. Is anybody surprised now that you have incidents like this?
Okay. I agree with Nick that lauding Luigi Mangione as a hero and a sex icon is evil and stupid. However, I think that if men are not, and men, assassins, politicians, alt media figures, they are not just them. You know, we are moral agents to a degree, but we are also products of moments in history. I think Kant was arguing about something. I don't fucking know. I don't read Kant. All right. But anyways, it's talking about like how somebody told me about this, that the successor to Napoleon in the middle of the 19th century, who was an infinitely more weak, uncharismatic, stupid person, and who declared himself emperor, but he was elected by the general population. They pointed out how stupid and shitty and inefficacious and dumb this politician was. But they said, while everybody's complaining about this politician, this like grandson or grandnephew of Napoleon, you have to understand that people craved the strength and certainty and courage of Napoleon in dark times. And so that man, while stupid and inefficacious and a sign of society falling apart, he was a product of his environment, right? And so that's where I would say, if you're going to look at Luigi Mangione and say it's repulsive that people are applauding him, well, the reason why people are applauding him is because they know or believe that the current American medical establishment is parasitic. They believe that the government has prohibited a public option in such a way that private corporations profit from the death and misery and sickness of Americans. That's the way that it's set up. And people view that system as deeply immoral. And so when you have a private healthcare insurance CEO, and by the way, I haven't even verified this story. I don't care enough to verify it because I condemn Luigi Mangione. But the narrative is that the CEO knowingly instituted an automatic AI assessment process that was going to give out denials that he knew statistically were going to be valid claims, and that as a result of using this new AI system, people were going to have their care pushed out, and as a result of that change in the system, people were going to get injured or they were going to die. And the CEO, because it's illegal to be incompetent, was going to bed at night every single day, making millions of dollars a year, in the full knowledge that he had injured or killed hundreds, if not thousands, of his fellow Americans, but because it was legal, it wasn't that big of a deal. And Luigi Mangione took that narrative personally, and he found that CEO and he gunned them down in the street. I don't think Luigi Mangione is justified. I think he should be incarcerated for the rest of his life. Maybe you should even kill him. I don't know. So death sentence or incarceration for the rest of his life. Those are my options for Luigi Mangione. However, if you don't understand what we've been writing down here within the Microsoft Paint's drawings, let's take a look at this. The left wing is not free from sin. Okay? It is not free from sin. I will not pretend the left wing is free from sin. The sins of the left wing include putting gays, blacks, and progressives and annoying over-the-top messaging into video games and movies, trying to promote a degenerate, sex-positive, trans-positive, drug-positive, cynical, destructive, postmodern worldview. This is Gamergate right here. Taking over academia and pop culture to the point that they have alienated half of the population who feel like they're constantly presented as the enemy. I understand this instinctively. Buzz Lightyear, the Buzz Lightyear movie, I know it's stupid. You can make fun of me if you want. I don't care. But the fact that they took Zurg, who is supposed to be an evil scientist and Buzz Lightyear's father, but then they turned it into Zurg is a time-traveling Buzz Lightyear who was corrupted by space in order to becoming a supervillain, was the dumbest fucking plot point I'd ever seen in my entire life. And I was thinking, like, what is this message? What is this movie trying to convey to my son? Because I was watching it with my child. And I think the message is trying to convey is to straight white men to look out for the evil inside yourself, which is like, that's an okay message. But Jesus Christ, does it not feel like white straight men are consistently the villains in modern media? Using liberal and progressive, like mix it up. Just throw an Arab terrorist in there every now and then, you know, throw a black gangster in there every now and then, you know, throw a Asian Yakuza member in there every now and then. Just spice it up. Anyways, using liberal and progressive values to govern social media to the point that in the late 10s, it felt like you could not be a Christian, literalist, social conservative, pro-Trump person without being censored. Censoring COVID and election topics in the name of the greater good. Leaving the border wide open, causing a migration crisis that has resulted in murders and rapes. Prioritizing the economy and the profits of corporations over the well-being of your working and middle class. The Silver didn't like that I put this as a left-wing sin, but I would argue that this is Bill Clinton with NAFTA. And that this is the, stop getting on my mouse, dog. My dog is walking on my mouse rope. Anyways, I would argue that this is neoliberals. Shrugging off crimes committed by ethno-religious minorities and sexual minorities while freaking about every crime committed by a white straight man. This is 100% true. BLM riots and deaths supported by the left, the Steve Scalise shooting, okay? But then look at this, okay? I'm not going to read it because it's going to take me a long time, but I've had the screen up for a while. There are projected 14,200,000 people who will die in the next 5 years as a result of right-wing policies. The right wing laughs about it. They're totally callous about it. They don't give a shit about it. And you're wondering why people think you're fascist. You're wondering why people think you're authoritarians. You're wondering why is everybody treating us so poorly? All we wanted to do was overthrow the government and the constitutional order of the United States. All we wanted to do was dispossess trans people through legislation. All we wanted to do was ban abortion, which while I think that elective abortion is immoral, there are plenty of women who have been injured and or killed as a result of the new legislation. It could be dozens, it could be hundreds, but you have to understand that that's a moral horror for the left wing. Propagandizing the public into distrusting and hating every facet of government. Alienating and attacking our allies through trade wars and stupid geopolitical grievances. This has destroyed tens of thousands of businesses. Tens of thousands of small businesses have been destroyed by Trump's tariffs. We are looking at substantive increases we are looking at farmers being bankrupt right now. And it's directly Trump's fault. You think that people aren't going to be angry? You think that if you bankrupt them, if you kill one of their family members, overseas, if you gleefully laugh at the deaths of people who look like them, that they're not going to get angry and they're not going to lash out? Complete and utter childish, stupid, myopic, middle school thinking. If you did not think that you could do all of these things without suffering consequences. So yeah, Charlie Kirk should be alive. Charlie Kirk should be alive, but you should also understand why he's dead.
Is anybody the least bit surprised?
No, but it's not just our rhetoric. Nick, it's you supporting a guy who tried to overthrow the Republic of the United States.
In a culture where mass murder and murder is celebrated, people cheer it on, they lionize cowardly assassins and killers. Is anybody the least bit surprised that it inspired a copycat? It inspired another? It shouldn't come as a surprise. But there's other echoes of the violence that we saw yesterday. We saw it imminently just the other week when that young girl, the Ukrainian refugee, was stabbed to death on the train. We saw it when Austin Metcalf was stabbed in the throat at a football practice.
I'm sorry, what did we see? I mean, I saw white people get murdered unjustly, and I saw their attackers being incarcerated. What did we see? Luke for $5 says, my wife is from Brazil, where trans people are regularly butchered for being trans by Christian morons. Preventing that from coming to the U.S. is a good thing. See what I'm saying?
We see it in Gaza for years, when innocent people are shot in the back of the head getting food for their children because they're starving.
Wait, that's a reason why Charlie Kirk would get shot. What?
The weight of the suffering, the cruelty, the malice, the hatred, it's becoming too much to bear. I think that's the real reason. Because we've seen violence before. We've seen horrible atrocities before. We've seen school shootings, terrorist attacks. But we all recognize we live in a time of nihilistic violence. And it's coming from all sides. Nihilistic violence perpetrated by barbarians, like these opportunists and predators, these young, mostly adolescent black men that are preying upon the innocent. And
how do we fix that, Nick? Because what I would say is we get them early childhood education, like black young kids who are born. We get them early childhood education and access to high quality food. We make sure that they don't live in food deserts. We get them grocery stores in their neighborhoods that allow them to actually have a decent diet instead of eating fast food and dog shit from the quick stop. Then I would say that we give them good, decent schools to go to, and we socialize young black men and young black women into being upstanding members of society. And then I would say that we emphasize academic and economic achievement as a way in order to break cycles of intergenerational criminality and poverty. That's my solution. So what's your solution? Because is it segregation? Because last I checked 6 months ago to a year ago, your solution was segregation. So, in my opinion, you're part of the problem, Nick.
the vulnerable on city subways, city streets. We see it in the barbarism, the predatory opportunity.
Homicides have been cut in half in the past 2 or 3 decades.
Opportunistic attacks, executions, random, cruel acts of violence. We see it in Zionism. Dare I say, in a certain strain of the Jewish religion, which says that the people of Palestine are collectively responsible for the actions of Hamas. None of them are innocent. They all must die. And sitting members of Congress like Randy Fine celebrates famine, starving women and children, 1 million people under the age of 18 being blown to smithereens, being starved forcibly. We see it in a
Earshot. So Bill is an ephebophile, but Trump is a pedo. No, whatever Trump's guilty of, Bill Clinton is guilty of as well. Earshot. Stop being fucking annoying.
another form, which is leftism. Communists, anarchists. There is a certain strain of radical transsexuals. For them, everything is political. Everything is ideological. All this propaganda that's got them whipped up about fascism.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Somebody said this and it sparked. Oh, Gavin 00 says this fucking clown had only dealt with cooking Jews in the abstract. This is too real for him. Yeah. Unironically. So when Nick goes on a live stream, and bear in mind this was a few years ago, but we should hold him to account for his words, okay? When Nick goes onto a live stream and he says, "Oh, I don't think it was 6 million," 5 ovens operating at X amount of hours, 12 batches of cookies per oven, 5 ovens running for 4 years. I don't think it adds up to 6 million. It might add up to a few 100,000, but it doesn't add up to 6 million. Now you can say, it's a joke, he's being callous, this, that, the other, but he is a Holocaust revisionist. He is somebody who thinks that the Holocaust was exaggerated in order to gain sympathy for the Jewish people to establish the state of Israel. And so he's laughing about, making jokes about, Jews having worse things done to them than what happened to Charlie Kirk. And then he sees Charlie Kirk get smoked and he's like, oh, just got real. I didn't understand. I didn't get it. And it's like, what did you think you were talking about? When you were talking about the mass political dispossession of Jewish people in Europe, and when you were talking about the mass execution of Jewish people in Europe, what did you think you were talking about when you were trying to minimize that narrative? What did you think you were talking about when you were trying to repopularize Holocaust revisionism and anti-Jewish sentiment and anti-Israeli sentiment in the West? Did you think that you were talking about vibes? Did you think you were talking about drum circles? What did you think you were talking about? Because you were talking about human beings dying in worse ways than Charlie Kirk died. I hate to say this, but it's true. Charlie Kirk was probably unconscious almost the moment that the bullet hit him. And if he wasn't unconscious immediately, he was unconscious within like 2 seconds, 3 seconds. As soon as you saw that arterial spurt, he probably had such a drop in blood pressure that he went unconscious. Okay, so he was almost instantaneously knocked into oblivion or the afterlife, depending on how you perceive death. He was almost instantaneously knocked into oblivion or the afterlife, and he probably did experience some pain. But by the time that he understood how much pain he was in, he was probably already unconscious. So he had a very quick death. And yet, we have people like Nick, people like Sean Strickland, the MMA guy, people like Elijah Schaefer, the neo-Nazi on Twitter, people like Keith Woods and all these dissident right-wing nationalists and Cultured Thug, who I respect, by the way. I respect Cultured Thug as an intellectual. But they cheer on their dissident right-wing freak audience to normalize and laugh at the same kind of violence that was visited upon Charlie Kirk. But it only becomes real violence. It only becomes something that you should care about. Ukrainians getting murdered by Russians, that's funny. Russia's based. Go fuck yourself. Israelis getting murdered, well, Hamas is based. Iran's based. Go fuck yourself. A bunch of Central Americans getting smoked and tortured and sodomized, that's funny. That's based. Fuck them. They're not part of our tribe. It took one of their tribe getting shot on video in front of their face for them to finally realize what they were talking about. And that should be fucking embarrassing. That should be embarrassing to Nick. That should be embarrassing to Nick's audience. That should be embarrassing to the dissident right. That should be embarrassing to conservatives. You should be shamed right now that the level of violence that you have visited on others or laughed about on others or been apathetic about to others, it took one of yours getting shot on close-up video to give a fuck about any of this stuff. Embarrassing. Fucking embarrassing and shameful.
A trans genocide, about the healthcare system. They believe the meaning of life is a political struggle, a political victory. And so they have no love, no charity towards their opponents. These are the different strains of nihilistic violence coming from all angles that we've seen. And notice it comes from everywhere. It comes from the political left. And by the political left, I don't mean every Democrat. I don't mean every liberal. I don't mean every Kamala voter. I mean a specific sect of the radical left that recognizes no limiting principles. We see that kind of nihilistic violence from a certain crowd of Jewish Zionists and their allies. Some evangelical Christians, atheistic Jews that are sympathetic, that wield immense influence in our government, and they want to wield our military against their adversaries. And we see it in the barbarians. We see it in the unthinking, primitive, backwards, regressive, you could say, undeveloped masses of people in other unenlightened parts of the world that are coming here and visiting the savagery upon us. And
the savagery should be incarcerated and killed. I want you to hear me when I say that. Any savage who rapes or murders any other human being who is within the United States jurisdiction should be incarcerated or killed. The levels of violence in our society are identical to the levels of violence that were present in our society in the 1950s and 1960s, which were thought of as peaceful, prosperous times.
if there is anything that can come out of this, I hope that it can be potentially a new consensus. This is not partisan, actually. It's not even ideological.
Yeah, it is.
People do not murder children in a Catholic church because they have gender dysphoria necessarily.
True.
Or they're sympathetic to transsexuals.
I don't know where he's going. I'm very curious.
Somebody does not murder Charlie Kirk because they voted for Kamala Harris. People do not stab young girls on trains because they're born black.
Oh, that's almost responsible rhetoric from Nick Fuentes.
People do not shoot Palestinians in the back of the head or cheer it on just because they're Jewish. The people that do this are lost. They have to be isolated and segregated out. A new consensus must emerge. Are you in favor of a society with meaning? A society where life is sacred, where life has sanctity, where people's lives and their dignity and their integrity is respected? Or are we going to live in a society that is a never-ending war between nihilistic tribes, warlords, savages, pagans? I see an emerging consensus, and I think that the mature people that actually love America, actually love our children, the people that recognize the division, the peril that we're in, we need to fortify a new consensus and rally the people of conscience, the people of decency, the people of humanity, the people of charity towards their fellow man, against those that want to kill us, against those that laugh and celebrate when innocent people are harmed. For any reason, for any ideological reason, against the people that are cruel, the people that are hateful. And by that, I mean the people that are really cruel, not the people that say things you disagree with, not the people that are provocative, not the people that are sometimes angry, but the people that are really cruel and really evil. And let me be clear about this, because I understand not a lot of people are loving this message right now. This is not the message that a lot of people want to hear right now. Here's another message you can try on for size.
Okay. I'm going to put this on Sins of the Right. White genocide propaganda making an entire generation of young white men dumb as fuck. Okay? The reason why I'm writing that, this might be mean, be alive, but genocide, when people think of the word genocide, they think of the Holocaust or they think of the Armenian genocide. So let me go ahead and put this on here, okay? Armenian genocide pictures. Okay. I'll go without the Holocaust since you probably don't give a shit about Jews. You think Jews are doing it. Here's probably a woman who's been shot. Here's a bunch of people being marched out in order to be murdered. Here's a bunch of people in camps waiting to die from death and disease. Here's 100 or 1,000 skulls. Here's a couple of children starving to death in the street. Here's the corpse of a child. Here's 2 children. Here's a child that's on the verge of death. Here's another child that's about to die. No one is doing this to you, okay? No one is doing this to you. If you think people are doing this to you, you're a fucking idiot. I'm sick of the white genocide rhetoric. I'm sick of it. What's happening is Mexicans. This guy is moving into your country in order to work into the construction industry or in order to work in the agricultural industry because he can make more money in our country than he can at home. And he can send his money home in order to stabilize economically his family. They're marrying each other 9 times out of 10, Hispanics are, and they're having Hispanic children. That's what they're doing 9 times out of 10. But every now and then, okay, mixed race Hispanic couple. Every now and then, a white guy sees a brown chick that's kind of hot and they have kids. Or every now and then, she's not white, but let's pretend she's white. A white girl sees a brown guy and thinks that he's kind of hot. And they have kids together. And these kids are brown instead of Northern European white. That's what's happening. And if you think that that's genocide, you're a fucking idiot. Okay? You're dumb. You're stupid. You're being propagandized to by malicious actors who want you to think that a Hispanic guy in a sweater marrying a white woman and having a mixed race child is genocide. Okay? You're stupid. You're either stupid or you're ignorant or you have reasons to be racist that happened in your life. Maybe a Mexican cut you off in traffic. Maybe a Puerto Rican guy threw out some fast food litter on the ground. Maybe a black guy beat you up for lunch money in middle school. I don't know. I don't know what the world did to hurt you, where you just decide that everybody who has a different skin tone or ethno-religious background than you, when they have sex with Northern Europeans and have children together, this is akin to getting shot in the head or getting starved to death. I don't know what is broken in your brain that makes you think that, but you need to stop it immediately. It is probably, you believing that has probably ruined your relationships. It's probably ruined your relationships with your family. It's probably ruined your relationships with your friends. It's probably ruined your relationships with your country. Stop believing it. It's fucking stupid. It's a stupid thing to believe. And Nick and his ilk who propagated this idea set are stupid as well. I'm not saying Nick is unintelligent. Nick's a brilliant man. But the fact that he believed getting shot in the head because of your ethno-religious or racial background is akin to having sex with a Latina woman and having mixed race children together makes him a prophet of a stupid ideology.
These people that are now selling t-shirts with Charlie Kirk and a bullet wound in his neck, they cannot be negotiated with. You cannot debate with them. You cannot persuade them to vote Republican. You cannot appeal to them. You will never convince them that you're a good person, that you just want the best for everybody. You will never.
I'm not adding the Bundy standoff to sins of the right because the Bundy ranchers were acquitted in federal court. It was a dispute over agricultural grazing in federal lands that got out of hand. And I actually think that using your First Amendment and Second Amendment rights, obviously you should try to win in court, but I don't have a problem with using your First Amendment and Second Amendment rights to standing up against legal but unjust action. And if you get incarcerated as a result, I don't really care either because you should fight it out in court, but I don't think that's immoral. And I don't want to beat that out of society. So I'm not going to add Bundy to the side, like that guy, Lavoy Finicum, who blew past a sheriff's office and then tried to pull a pistol on 2 federal agents and got smoked. I think Lavoy Finicum was a fucking idiot. But I don't think that is, I think is The information Lavoy Finicum was operating off of was incorrect, but I don't think that he had unrighteous intent in his heart. I just think he was a stupid person.
Get them to stop hating you. People like to say, well, can the left finally admit that they have their own problem? They'll never admit that. They'll never.
90% of liberals have already disavowed this incident. And even people in the center who are like me, I disavow the murder of Charlie Kirk. I think you should, absolutely. It's the easiest thing in the world to say. Don't kill your political opponents unless absolutely necessary. I will, if necessary, kill jihadists. I will, if necessary, kill communists. I will, if necessary, kill fascists. But that will be an issue of absolute last resort. And until that day, I will have conversations with people who are sympathetic to jihadism. I will have conversations with people who are sympathetic to communism and fascism. It will only be when they are trying to overthrow the government of the United States that I think they should be killed.
Never admit that. These craven losers, that person that when Charlie Kirk got shot in the neck, instinctually got up and turned and celebrated, they have to be defeated.
How, Nick? Please share how.
We can't change their minds. We can't invite them to change our minds. We can't negotiate with them. We can't invite them for a political compromise. If your gut reaction to seeing someone take a bullet in the neck and their face explode and their young children run up to them because they were afraid of the noise, if your reaction was to grin and celebrate, you must be defeated. You must be destroyed.
How, Nick? AKA Batisui for $10. Cotter, it's more than fair to really hate Trump. I think the president should make American lives a priority. The rest of us can care more about other countries and people. That's not his job. Sure. But again, if you're callous, because we're talking about like the right, right? We're talking about the left, which is made up of many parties and many people. But the right has been celebrating all of the cruelty that I laid out in my sins of the right, sins of the left stuff. And so if they're willing to celebrate mass death, starvation, deaths by preventable disease, war, genocide, murder, all that kind of shit, as long as it's happening to the right people, right? As long as Andre Hernandez Romero, a gay man from Venezuela who was seeking refuge in the United States, well, he wasn't really a citizen and he's not technically entitled to asylum status in the United States. So since he's Hispanic and he got deported to Saqqat where he was tortured and sodomized, no big deal, because he's the wrong skin color. He's a part of the wrong ethno-religious background, and we don't give a fuck what happens to him. If you're going to be that callous about Andre Hernandez Romero, I'm not going to cry when you get shot. I'm not. I'll say it's bad. I'm saying it's making the country a worse place. I'll say that it's making the world a more dangerous place. I'll say that more people are going to die as a result of the actions of this shooter. 100%. I will condemn with every fiber of my being bad people getting shot for expressing their bad ideas in public. But I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry for Charlie Kirk, and I'm not going to act like this is a unique thing that happened in American history. Conservatives have been laughing about everyone else dying except for them, and when one of them finally gets shot in a public way, they go, oh, it's on now. And it's like, bitch, was it ever off? When you were laughing about 14 million preventable deaths over the next 5 years, was it off? When you were drone striking a boat in the Caribbean and 11 people died and we don't know who they are or what they're about, we just have to take your word that they're all narco terrorists, and you laughed about it. It was off. That was you being normal. When you try to overthrow the government of the United States, when you try to lie about the election in order to institute a new monarch, that's when you were playing softly. Fuck you. How about that?
You must be identified, you must be isolated, and you must be eradicated from our society.
How? Do you want to ban them from social media, or do you want to kill them, Nick?
Not Democrats, not leftists, not liberals, those people that would...
There's plenty of those cruel people on your side, Nick. As a matter of fact, they come into my chat all the time. So if you're identifying sociopathic lack of sympathy for the dead as an issue, your side has just as many unsympathetic sociopaths. Absolutely.
Celebrate in that moment. That is pure evil, pure malice. There is no charity in a person's heart. I don't care who it is, who sees anybody get their neck exploded and celebrate like that. That's the kind of evil we're dealing with.
I celebrate when jihadists get shot. When jihadists get shot or drone striked, I go, nice. Based. Awesome. Same thing with fascists and communists. If an unironic fascist neo-Nazi murderous piece of shit gets murdered, I watched Fury and Saving Private Ryan and name a World War II movie, and I watched Nazis get smoked, and I'm like, yeah, you know, they might be normal soldiers, but they're fighting for Nazi Germany, so fuck them. That's my reaction to watching Nazis get shot in films. My reactions to jihadists getting killed in combat footage is, yeah, fuck them. That's my reaction to it. I've seen plenty of jihadist necks get exploded. Okay? So I think this is a fundamental misdiagnosis of the problem, Nick.
That's the kind of evil that has taken over our society.
Which, by the way, how did you plan on dispossessing? Like, I haven't heard an answer to this yet. Nick, how did you plan on dispossessing Jews of power in the United States and resegregating blacks and Hispanics from white Americans in the United States? How did you plan on doing that? Was it going to be vibes? Was it going to be drum circles? Are you a hippie? Are you a pacifist? Is that how you were going to dispossess Jews from power? Or is it now that you see what violence is, you're actually repulsed by it? Was it an abstraction until this speech? I'm happy. I'm happy that you're realizing that there's sociopaths in the world. I'm happy you're realizing that there's killers in the world. I'm happy that you're seeing that when somebody's jugular gets exploded by a deer rifle, that's bad. But you've been cheering this on for a decade, and it just got real when somebody in your industry got smoked. Sorry, not sorry. Sorry, Nick, you just learned what the world was. You just found out what violence was 48 hours ago. Kind of fucking amazing considering your rhetoric for the past decade.
It has become too common. We've let it fester. Like with Luigi Mangione, they thought it was cute. They thought it was glib. And look at what we have now. We are on the verge of full-on political violence and civil war. I don't think people realize what that looks like. There's going to be a lot of children without mothers and fathers, a lot of mothers and fathers grieving their dead children. I don't want that.
Good. Based.
Nobody should want that.
Good. Based.
But when it comes to evil people, cowardly, weak, evil people that snipe at Trump, at Charlie Kirk, like the gunman that came to my house last year, unfortunately,
that's another reason why it's probably real, because he just as easily could have gotten smoked last year. If he answered his door, he would have been dead.
It's not always up to us which battles we fight. When they show up to your front door, when they take shots at the rally, at the Change My Mind, we don't have a choice. We have.
Sorry, be alive. The message stays the same. So he still wants to dispossess Jews from power? He still wants to segregate Black Americans and Hispanic Americans away from Northern European whites? Okay, how is he going to achieve that without violence, be alive? I asked him, but he's not here to answer my question. So maybe you can answer it for me. How do you plan on dispossessing Jews of social and political power in the United States without force? How do you plan on dispossessing and segregating Black and Hispanic Americans out of white neighborhoods without force? Feel free to answer that fucking question. I would love it if you answered that question.
To confront evil. We have to fight evil. We can never give in to evil, and we have to win. Recognize this. If these people ever get power over us.
Oh, you got alts, bro? You got alts? Bro, you forgot to change the structure of your alt. That's so sad. Why are you trying to make it seem like Nick is changing his message just because Charlie got killed? This is the first response to Charlie's death, so he's being more graceful. Message stays the same. Why are you trying to make it seem like Nick is changing his message just because Charlie got killed? This is his first response to Charlie's death, so he's more graceful. Message stays the same. Wanted middle and be alive. That is pathetic. You wrote a message, and I read my chat. You wrote a message, and because you're a gay op for Nick Fuentes, which is sad, you went to an alt, presuming that you would be banned, and copied and pasted it onto another alt. Dude, you're sad. Go get a fucking life, man. Seriously. Close the computer, turn off the computer, stop listening to Nick Fuentes, go outside, make some friends, talk to normal people, find a girlfriend, get married. Being the cock sleeve for a dissident right-wing propagandist with multiple YouTube profiles so you can spread Christian nationalist propaganda is a waste of your God-given life. It's a waste of your vital spark. It's a waste of your mortality. Why are you being the propagandistic cock sleeve of a dissident right-wing creator? God gave you a life for more than this. Shut off. Feel free to join our community. Fuck. I'll post. North is calling me. Hey, give me a second, bud. I'm just gonna wrap up. All right.
Alrighty.
But we'll chat. Our chat is pertinent. So give me a second. I gotta invite a groiper who has alts in my chat.
What the fuck?
In order to come to a better community where he won't be a fucking tool. Here's an invite. Okay. Here's an invite. I'm posting it in chat. Okay. Wanted middle / be alive. You can direct message me. As a matter of fact, you probably won't do well in the Discord. So you can join the Discord, but you're probably not going to do well. But go ahead and direct message me. But you, being dumb enough to have 2 alts in my chat, posting the same message within 30 seconds, and being the propagandistic cocksleeve of a dissident right-wing creator, you need a better life, bro. I don't care how ugly you are. I don't care what race you are. I don't care what religion you are. You need a better life. You will be my personal project. So DM me if you feel like it. Otherwise, fuck off. So anyways, sorry, North, let me just wrap up the segment real quick, kind of with an outro and a shill, and then we'll get cracking. So yeah, guys, so I'm going to wrap up the segment real quick. I'm going to bring on a friend. We're going to talk, and let me find my StreamYard real quick so I can go full screen. In summary, I'm happy that Nick Fuentes is willing to condemn violence. I'm happy he's willing to acknowledge where we are. I did a couple of drawings of the sins of the right wing, sins of the left wing. Please remind me by the end of stream to go over them again. That way we can kind of have like a miniature segment describing why we're doing what we're doing when we're doing it. However, I also think Nick is still incredibly lost. I think he has fostered the toxic and violent political environment in which we are currently surrounded. I think him realizing that he was on the chopping block is what has woken him up in order to turn the temperature down. While I applaud him for trying to turn the temperature down, I think he needs to recognize that he was a part of the problem of what turned our temperature up in the first place. So if he wants to acknowledge that, awesome. If he doesn't want to acknowledge that, I think sins of the sides too. I'll save that drawing for another segment. If he doesn't want to acknowledge that, then I think he's just kidding himself. So anyways, I parasocially love you. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a beautiful day.